Talking Giants YouTube, what is up? My name is Justin Penik, and the search for the Giants GM spot seems to be going pretty strong. They are casting a pretty wide net of candidates that they are looking at from a lot of successful organizations and good organizations in the National Football League. But this video is going to be about Adam Peters, the second hottest name amongst Giants fans, I feel, right now, out of guys that they've requested to interview, but also I think also just the second most qualified, or the most qualified right up there with Joe Schoen, because these guys together are both assistant general managers. And these are the two assistant general managers that the Giants have put in requests to interview so far. So, assistant general manager of the San Francisco 49ers, Adam Peters. We'll give you his background. We'll talk about some philosophy stuff. We'll talk about some draft stuff. He's really rooted in the draft. He loves the draft. We'll do a little bit of a comparison between him and Joe Schoen, and maybe we'll even talk about some coaching implications and some scheme implications if you're into that kind of stuff. So that's what we're going to be doing in this video. Here is Adam Peters' background. Started at UCLA. He went to college at UCLA, realized that he couldn't really play the game of football, so in the early 2000s, he wanted to stay in football, so he did some scouting stuff, football operation stuff for UCLA. Early 2000s, he's meeting with some New England Patriots scouts. They like the way that he presents information. So boom, in 2003, he is hired as a scouting assistant for the New England Patriots. Stays with the New England Patriots until the year 2009. Then he starts with the Denver Broncos in their scouting department, climbs the ladder throughout the years there from 2009, and then 2016, he is named the Director of College Scouting with the Denver Broncos. Spends 1 year in that position with the Broncos as the Director of College Scouting. 2017, he is named the Vice President of Player Personnel of the San Francisco 49ers. Spends a couple years in that role. 2021, he is promoted to 49ers Assistant General Manager. Now, something important to note about Adam Peters, something very important to note. He grew up a 49ers fan. He really loves the 49ers. He viewed in 2017, at the time that he got the Vice President of Player Personnel job, he viewed that as his dream job. He has said that obviously he does have GM hopes and he has prospects of becoming a GM. He grew up a 49ers fan, ran into Joe Montana on an elevator as a kid, got a program signed. His family lives out in California. So when you're thinking about it, if you're one of those people that's asking yourself, well, who would want to be the Giants GM right now? Adam Peters, certainly I think, would welcome a GM job, but he really does hold San Francisco close to his heart. So that is just a fact. I'm just throwing it out there. Take that information as you wish. The thing that sticks out the most to me when you look at Adam Peters is the amount of credit that he gets for selecting, suggesting, really highlighting certain very good football players that his teams have acquired that he's been part of the last couple years. And it even goes back to his time with the Denver Broncos. Peters is frequently given at least a share of credit for Denver's acquisition of Von Miller, Chris Harris Jr., Malik Jackson, and C.J. Anderson, all of whom played big roles in that franchise's Super Bowl 50 title. We're going to talk about George Kittle, how he really pushed for him in 2017 and the process about how that happened. And then this past year, he is really instrumental, apparently according to Chris Sims on his NBC Sports Network show, in wanting Trey Lance. So it really is crazy how many times Adam Peters has gotten somewhat credit for bringing in a certain player from a certain school, from a certain spot, and how they've contributed from the start. So even outside of the guys that just Peters has gotten credit for, from 2017 to 2019, when he was the Vice President of Player Personnel, the 49ers drafted 4 superstars, like undoubtedly and unquestionably superstars in the National Football League right now. George Kittle, 2017, he was a 5th-round pick. 2018, Fred Warner, linebacker, he was a 3rd-round pick. 2019, Nick Bosa, one of the best pass rushers in the National Football League, and Deebo Samuel, wide receiver in 2019. It took him a couple years to get going, but this year, man, has he shown his worth and his value being like this do-it-all running back, wide receiver kind of player. So really, 4 superstars in 3 years the 49ers have brought in. So let's talk about the process in which George Kittle was brought into the building. When Peters was working with the Broncos, he knew George Kittle. Then he came to the 49ers, and the guys and the coaches really articulated what they were looking for in a tight end. So you look at it through a different lens. And then we saw that Kittle was a very undervalued player. For the 49ers scouting department, it's not about only finding players at positions of need. It's more important to find players with specific skills that fit the vision of Kyle Shanahan and his coaching staff. So that is extremely, extremely important. Where George Kittle possibly didn't fit, maybe they didn't view him with the Denver Broncos as, they viewed him as like that 5th round prospect where he was taken, right? But once Kyle Shanahan made clear, this is what I'm looking for in a tight end. This is what I'm looking for in a tight end 1. This is what I'm looking for in a tight end 2, and how their skill sets should differentiate based off of what he wants his offense to do. Once Kyle Shanahan was clear about that, it gave a guy like Adam Peters to say, hey, this George Kittle, I'm actually going to put a 3rd round grade on him instead of like a 5th round grade where he actually was drafted. But they knew, the organization knew, that they could get Kittle in the 5th round despite them having a 3rd round grade on him. They kind of gambled a little bit like that. They hit. George Kittle becomes like one of the league's best tight ends, and he's breaking NFL records left and right? So that was the George Kittle process, and it started when Adam Peters was with the Denver Broncos, kind of looking at him, scouting him, getting further clarification about what they're looking for and the traits that they're looking for in a player, bumped them up the draft board. George Kittle's a San Francisco 49er. Great process, great communication between head coach and scouting department, GM, management, right? That's exactly what you're looking for. How they manage the cap. That's what I also want to look at right now as well. I don't have any specific quotes. I don't have any specific instances where Adam Peters is talking about the cap, but you can see where the Bills and the 49ers are. The Bills with Joe Schoen, you could see where those two organizations are in terms of not having the most cap space in the world, but they have a high winning percentage, and you could see the Giants at the bottom of the barrel with they have no cap space and they have a low winning percentage. That's important. We're going to need a GM that can come in here and can manage and can build a football team with not a lot of cap space. That's almost a job requirement. Next on the docket for us, does Adam Peters use analytics? I could not find any specific quotes or instances where he's talking about working with analytics, but I would say clear and obvious yes, because in everyday discourse and everyday almost conversation as reasoning for picking players or justifying picking players, Adam Peters has used this in 2 specific instances that I could find. One, when he was reflecting and talking about San Francisco 49ers tight end George Kittle. 49ers picked Kittle in the 5th round of the draft. After Jimmy Garoppolo took over as quarterback, Kittle led all NFL tight ends, including New England's Rob Gronkowski, in yards per route run, an advanced receiving metric from Pro Football Reference. Peters says these types of analytics play a role in front office evaluations. Also, in justification for taking Aaron Banks in the 2nd round, a guard from Notre Dame of the 2021 draft, the 49er also consulted their own research and development department, which conducts advanced analytics on draft prospects. That group put Banks in the 93rd percentile when it came to pass blocking on play action snaps, something the 49ers use often. I think that's awesome. Now, you can make an argument. I certainly can make an argument. Bobby can make an argument because we do our own draft work about a guy like Aaron Banks. Does he fit that outside zone rushing scheme? But clearly, based off of, guarantee you, their film work, but also the data that they got from that analytics department, from that analytics room, it fits their heavy play action scheme, their heavy play action system. It fits that well. So boom. Aaron Banks, who a lot of teams had a 3rd round grade on, they got him in the 2nd round, and as we know, kind of at least in 2021's draft, guards were kind of hard to come by. Teams were snagging up interior offensive linemen kind of early, and Aaron Banks was one of those guys from Notre Dame. But that is, boom, 2 instances where Adam Peters is using analytics and is using specific metrics as justifications for getting players, drafting players, acquiring players, etc., etc. I really like that. Breaking news, I'm a big fan of analytics. I have a stats report video that I did when the Giants were still relevant. One of the things I do want to talk about as well, if Adam Peters is brought in as general manager, we are looking at the Giants draft class this year saying we need to revamp this offensive line. I'm going to mention a name that a lot of you are going to get excited over, and that is Tyler Linderbaum. I think it is very likely if a guy like Peters does come in and he brings in an offensive coordinator or he brings in a coach that is going to implement a 49ers type of style offense of outside zone, right? Think of the 49ers where Elijah Mitchell, they're running to the outside the tackles a lot, right? Think of the Minnesota Vikings with Dalvin Cook. They're running outside the tackles a lot, right? Outside zone. It's a very tough offense to really replicate and do. But the 49ers have done it for years because they have athletic offensive linemen. You need offensive linemen with an athletic profile. And Tyler Linderbaum, his draft stock goes up in the Giants' eyes if a guy like Adam Peters is brought in here because, as you can see, PFF grades aren't always the best thing to go off of, but Tyler Linderbaum is strongest when you look at his zone grade versus his gap grade. Like usually, you have power gap, power schemes. I'm not the biggest scheme guy, but there is a difference between what the Giants have run over the years, which is just gap stuff and not going to outside zone. You can see that Tyler Linderbaum, he has a very, very high zone grade when it comes to his ability as an offensive lineman. He is very, very strong in that regard. He's a very, very athletic center. Doesn't have the most strength, but he's very, very athletic, and I think that could be somebody that the Giants could target. Keep an eye on. If Adam Peters is GM, I am going to start to expect that Tyler Linderbaum will be a Giant with one of those 2 first-round picks, or if they maybe even want to trade back. Interesting. Okay, so let's have a conversation to kind of end this off. Joe Schoen versus Adam Peters. Joe Schoen, I think, is more qualified for the job, and I think he is a safer pick. Now, I say safer not in a bad way, because I really do view Joe Schoen and Adam Peters as 1A and 1B. But Adam Peters is more exciting. I think he is more exciting. He's only held the assistant GM spot for 1 year, but clearly he has been instrumental with the San Francisco 49ers process since 2017. Joe Schoen was hired as an assistant GM for the Buffalo Bills in 2017. Joe Schoen has talked a lot about how he has had to transform and revamp the Buffalo Bills process. We didn't get that with this, between Adam Peters' comments. We didn't get how he transformed that system and that building and that process. But I guarantee you they had to. I mean, the 49ers, but outside of the Harbaugh years, they have been a very, very bad organization. And even towards the end of the Harbaugh years, they were kind of down in the dumps again where they needed stability. And John Lynch and clearly Adam Peters were 2 guys that brought that stability to them. So 2 guys that have experience of turning around bad processes and bad franchises. And that is exactly what the Giants need right now. So I think Peters is more exciting because I think there's more out there of him that says, wow, look at what he did. Look at what he implements. Look at what he suggested here. Look at the players that he suggested. Look at the players that he's hugging and that he's hugging after a big win that, it's so great and they're celebrating. But I think Schoen might be the safer hire because I think he's been working in the NFL longer. I think he's had higher positions for longer, but these are still 2 young guys that did come up around similar times. But I think Schoen, just my opinion, I think he's a little bit more qualified. But right now, it is 1A, 1B. The biggest difference between the 2 from their quotes is Joe Schoen talked about, it's important to get football players that can pair with your offensive coordinator and defense coordinator and that can pair with your scheme. But it's also important to get versatile players because if those coordinators ever move on and if you ever get somebody different in here, you need football players that can be versatile. Adam Peters doesn't seem to think that way, at least with Kyle Shanahan. Because Shanahan has said, this is the kind of player that I want, and Adam Peters has been like, we're going to get that kind of player that can fit this kind of scheme. That is the biggest difference between the 2. Where I think Schoen is going to be like, things could always change, so we're going to draft players that are versatile football players that, yes, we want them to fit a scheme, but Peters is kind of all in on, Kyle Shanahan has kind of taught me this. We need to pair players with our coaches and what our coaches are looking for. And we need to have that good communication between front office and coaches about, hey, this is what we need to do together. And especially when you consider if Tyler Linderbaum, a guy like Tyler Linderbaum, if he is being considered, he really does fit an outside zone scheme. Does he fit more of an inside the tackles power scheme, gap scheme? I don't know. I don't think so. So we shall see what happens. 1A, 1B, Joe Schoen, Adam Peters. Very, very exciting right now. The trepidations that I have with really both of them, and this is a trepidation with any GM candidate, I'm trepidatious that Joe Schoen is a product of Brandon Beane, and I'm also a little anxious that Adam Peters could possibly be a product off of Kyle Shanahan's really strong vision. Does Adam Peters really need that strong head coach that can be clear about what he wants and that really, really good system? Because Kyle Shanahan has, you can argue, one of the best systems in the National Football League right now. Those are the only trepidations that I have with those two guys. That is a video. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned a little bit and hope you are continuing to think about Giants GM, and hopefully these two guys are on your radar and on your favorites, because I think they are our favorites, and I hope they're the Giants' favorites too. All right, peace. See you later. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.